It's just the 4 hour chart's really just pranging me up. I don't know what's going on.
No, it's been choppy since last week. Once the month ended, Feb month ended, it's been choppy. Even me trading the forex pairs, it's been bullying me a little bit.
Yeah, there's just I think just huge amounts of indecision. That's all I'm seeing, just indecision everywhere. But I don't know, it's still playing to our bias. Um, we'll get to it when we get to the charts anyway. Should we get into it?
Yeah, let's. My screen sharing is disabled.
You're disabled.
Who knows? I could be. Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who
I am.
knows?
I'm actually gonna. I've applied for a blue badge. Hopefully, my
Oh,
diabetes will allow me to get one.
so you just wanted the disabled parking thing, huh?
Man, I just want VIP parking everywhere. Right, should we do
Uh,
this?
all right, so let's look at fundamentals first from last week before we move into the new week. From the last week, what I see is on Monday. Monday was the last good day that we had bigger moves during the on Monday and Tuesday of last week. And on Monday, we had Bank of Japan Ueda speak, the designated new governor, and he reiterated the same comments that the previous governor has been making. It's the same dovish comments, right? So Japanese yen has been weak. Uh, like if you see, he mentions to appropriate to keep easing the policy. So nothing has changed there. Japanese yen stays weak still. And if you look into the US dollar news here with durable goods orders, what do we see? We see the core durable goods. Core durable goods excludes transportation. So if you notice the number, it's come in way higher than the forecast. Even the forecasted expected a higher number, but the number is still much, much higher. So this shows inflation is persisting. But if you look at the number below, the one which includes transportation, so we see a decrease, right? A big decrease. So there must be some form of manipulation going on with the energy related stuff. So let's look at this. See, it's apparently because of Boeing. So that's what's caused the main drop in durable good orders. That's quite interesting to see. What else do we have? Oh, look at this one. Pending home sales is extremely high, 8.1%. If you remember Paul's previous speech, he kept mentioning the housing market. And again, if you look at the number, that's still persisting. That's a big difference, by the way, if you compare it with the forecast,
Yeah, major,
right?
major difference.
I mean, huge difference. That shows you inflation is heavy, persisting. Okay, then we see retail sales with Japanese yen. Nothing surprising there. It's high because inflation is persisting and they're still easing in quantitative easing. Housing starts, again, that's a big number difference, 6.6% compared to the forecast. Inflation is very high in Japan. Bank of Japan core CPI at 3.1%, stagnant, right? What else do we have? So we have consumer confidence in US. That's come in a bit lower. So that's interesting. The consumers are not that confident in the market.
And I think that's kind of just from talking to people on a day-to-day basis, like there's more people that are starting to wake up and actually start to feel some of the pain now. Um, Even if you look at like social feeds like Reddit and people are complaining about just cost of living, there's someone now talking about like the real estate just being propped up by the agents.
Yep. Yep, exactly. I think I saw another statistic that said the household savings it was around 30%, but in the recent 1 year, I think it's dropped to 3%. So it's 10x below, you know.
So
And now
that's
they
saying that they 3%
yeah,
of all of their take-home money is what they put in their savings or in their investment fund. I guess it's the same thing for a lot of these consumers.
yeah, no, it's like it's just the liquidity they had. Like people were saving 30%, now it's 3%. Now because they have such a small saving, they are not able to invest that, right? Because they want to hold up that little bit of money that they have. So that shows you the stock market and everything should be dropping.
Yeah, makes sense.
What else do we have? On Wednesday, the first day of the month, we had a few news. Let's see what's important here. We had Governor Bailey speak. Let's see if he's mentioned anything. He had some dovish comments actually. So he said he mentions obviously we need to hike rates more. That's obvious because inflation is still in double digits. Bank rate has to maybe increased. Nothing has been decided. So the same stuff that he's been mentioning. So he still says wages have been slightly higher, right? So yep, still bearish on the British pound, which is interesting. I think this caused a little bit of bearish moves with the pound this week, which I'll show you in the charts in a minute. What else do we have? Manufacturing PMI came in pretty much stagnant. Nothing different there. Unemployment claims came at 190, which is a bit lower from the previous week. This is interesting. What is I don't really look at this exact statistic. So
What,
labor efficiency. So it measures the labor efficiency when producing goods and services. And
this is for the US?
Yeah, for the US.
Well, it's not very efficient there. Not compared to China. Not compared to China. If you watch that film, American Factory, and all the Chinese workers are just like, why are the Americans so lazy? Wow, that should not have done that. I should not have done that. But yeah, watch that. It just where the Chinese like workers and the managers of their factories where they have all of these like rotational shifts, so like production doesn't stop. And then they go to America and these American factories are like clocking in and out at 9 to 5 and they don't do any more work.
Yeah. The Chinese people are extremely efficient. I mean, I don't want to make some comments that's going to get me
It's
banned.
it's a well-oiled system. It's a
Yep.
well-oiled system. That's what we need to say.
So on Friday we had Tokyo core CPI, little bit just it measures in Tokyo the CPI. And if you look at the CPI number over the past few months, it's been going up and up and up. But this current month, if you notice the 3.9% which came in Jan, it's dropped a little bit, right? So that's interesting because the overall CPI is stagnant though. Unemployment rate, it's a bit low, nothing significant. ISM services PMI at 55.1, higher, inflation is persisting. So let's look at the current week, and this week has heavy fundamentals because it's NFP week. So Monday, nothing really big. Maybe we can look at the factory orders, and they have been forecasted to drop, right? That will be interesting to see. Big one. Powell's. We have a speech from Jerome Powell on Tuesday. So this is going to maybe give us some direction on what he's thinking by looking at the recent statistics. Again, on Wednesday, we have ADP non-farm payroll, the employment change. So this is going to be interesting because it's gone higher, right? And if you look at the numbers, it's been going in average, it's been going higher, right? So that shows inflation is persisting. Jobs are supposed to drop if the rate hikes are working.
Wasn't the last one where they did actually come down?
Oh no, the last one was very high.
Oh, it's actually the opposite.
The NFP number, I'm going to show you in a minute. So he speaks on this day as well. Is it a conference or something?
No, I think it's just
So he's just going to testify about the monetary policy report in DC.
basically
Again,
translate it to them so they understand it.
yeah. And Joel's job openings, they predict for a drop in jobs, right? So we have contradiction a little bit here, but the main thing is going to be the NFP data. This is a precursor to NFP, right? So what else do we have? See, we have GDP for Japanese yen stagnant at 0.2%. Is the forecasted. Unemployment a bit higher now, right? 195 unemployment claims. So this is the most important day of the week on Friday. We have a lot of fundamentals. We have JPY monetary policy statement. That's important to see what direction they're heading with the new governor. The press conference, and then we have British pound, the GDP. And if you look at the GDP, it's predicted to come in higher at 0.1%, right? That shows you inflation is persisting.
Yeah, this seems if they were doing their work, then it wouldn't.
It shouldn't be growing. The economy should be receding, right? Recession. So it's necessary. Recession is a necessary thing with UK at the moment. What else do we have here?
There were a few articles, I think, last week that came out that they were like narrowly escaping a recession. Did you see any of those papers? I think it was from the Bank
Not.
of England.
I think I saw just some news regarding Brexit. I think,
Give me a
but
second.
nothing regarding that. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah, so now they're so it was the Bank of England, and this was on what day was this? But essentially, they were saying that the economy will shrink by 1% versus the 3% that was previously expected.
Yeah, but from what I've seen over the past, they themselves they're waffling. They don't know what they're saying. Every
Well, then
time they
you
say something, the opposite happens.
like these guys have got it. They've got a long road ahead of them. Like the UK, if you look at the JP Morgan as well,
Yeah.
these guys actually said that the UK, they were the ones who said the UK is going to avoid a recession, and they were the first bank to say it.
Mhm.
So whether this is just it's well the opposite of FUD, just trying to protect the pound essentially.
Yeah, I mean it's at a 40-year high. Like inflation is at a 40-year high. How can that how can the recession not be severe? Is the question.
Exactly, and you can't increase at the rate that they did without having some dramatic pullback in the economy. So let's see it.
Yeah, and even if you look at this, he mentions it's going to go to the pre-COVID level just 2026. So it's a long time. I don't know how they're gonna if because they have to raise rates, but if they raise rates too much, it's gonna mess up the economy. But if they don't, that can literally destroy the pound. So they're in a very interesting situation.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's what we have here with the British pound. And then the big one at the end of the day, NFP. The NFP is going to give us a lot of indication on how the Fed might react, because if you look at the number, the previous number was ridiculous, right? It was at 517K compared to the forecast. That's what made the dollar, everyone got really bullish on the dollar, because this number shouldn't be this high, first of all, and it needs to drop. Employment has to drop, not go in higher, right? So this current NFP data is going to give us some clarification if this was an outlier data or is this an actual trend that we're going to be seeing, right? So this is going to be important to see. And unemployment as stagnant, right? And one thing to remember, if you're trading the New York session, we have a daylight saving shift with the US, so the clocks are going to go back 1 hour. That's important to keep in mind. So let's look at the Dixie first before we look at the crypto pairs. Where is it? Yeah. So the weekly candle is what we mentioned last week, a necessary pullback that had to happen into the supply demand area that we saw exactly at 104 pretty much. And if you go down to the daily time frame, what do we see? Price was consolidating here. This is why we had some choppiness this week, yeah. And possibly price is done consolidating. Maybe we might see a move up over this supply demand area at 105.3. So that's let's see what happens this week. I think the NFP data and stuff is going to give it some momentum. So let's look at BTC. Yeah, bro, you want to go through BTC?
Yeah, should I pull up my chart actually?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just make sure I got the right one. It's very annoying, by the way, because now BUSD is gone off
Yep.
Binance because of the Paxos thing. So Firstly, I lost all my charts with FTX, and now I've lost all my charts because they were linked to BUSD. Type of fuck it. I'm just using the trading view chart for now. And then I'll fix up a Binance USDT chart in later. All right, let's go into let's look at the 4 hour chart because that's where we saw our biggest movement of the week. It's essentially as BTC, as the Dixie came down, actually we had BTC come down, so some slight correlation there. But it was playing in line with all of our TA from last week as volume started to die off. We did have that pullback, so that was a tick. We did well there. Now, price, and I said to you just before we started the call, like this consolidation range here on the 4 hour is just a lot of indecision. So I think based on what Dixie does from now, whether it breaks down from this support or it breaks the resistance that you highlighted just before, that would really decide what we're doing now on the 4 hour. Because if we move up to like the higher time frames, let's start on the monthly, we're respecting I think it's a higher trend on this 50 moving average, but we're getting a rejection. Volume died off here, as we can see. And I did expect on a monthly that we probably end up with like an evening star pattern. So currently that's still playing out. It's still early days in the month, but I'm looking for a large volume candle coming down now for the month. And if we pull up to the weekly, still price is respecting. You can see the position I took, that was on the 4 hour. Price is still respecting the 50 moving average on a downward trend. However, I did notice something. Was it this time frame? Was it a different time frame? I'll have to go back and check. But it really depends on this 4 hour chart, what happens. That indecision will clear up because we have a very strong resistance level at around 25.3K, and we're having strong support at about 22.3K. So we're seeing ranging between that. I can see a lot of people taking a lot of spot positions. A lot of accumulation has happened in this range as well. And that might be because if we pull up to I think 12-month time, no, I think I'm getting a bit excited. Was it 12 month or was it I may have to share this chart in the group actually where I drew all the trend lines for it. There is a potential that I saw this chart on why did that happen? On Twitter, and it's basically predicting that this is the trend, and anything kind of above this was our major QE and stimulus package, and now that's just come back to touch. So we would then start to see a lot more sort of steady growth on BTC. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it would kind of explain. So if you were to take, it almost looks like a giant yearly fake out. Lower. Do you see that range there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the growth from the beginning. And I don't think this has it, but you'll see it points down to here as well. But once again, like I said, right when we started this bear cycle, that these were the major accumulation points. So we're averaging in, and I'm taking profit still into BTC at this level. My bias doesn't change unless we break 25.3K. But currently we're having some strong resistance. Monthly, volume died off on previous month, and I'm expecting more downward trend here. So as long as we keep respecting the 50 moving average on this weekly, I am expecting us to come down. Oh, here's my line, I think. Yeah, there it is. See this long trend line here on my weekly? Blue one, should I change the color for it? Yeah. So we should still be secure there, just to accumulate as much as possible. But as I said, look, I'm just going to be paying attention to if 25K breaks, I'm keeping my short in that I've had in since I think 25.1K. And I'm just looking and evaluating what price does around 22.3, which is exactly where we are here now. And you can see here on the daily that the there's a lot of indecision in these candles. Volume is dying off both on longs and shorts. Granted, it's been Saturday and Sunday, so it's the weekend, so we expect lower volume, but there's a clear uptrend here on the daily. But as long as it respects the weekly, which it is, we should go down. I haven't. ETH did exactly the same thing, followed suit. That massive sell-off essentially happened at exactly the same time. And look, the charts are mirroring. And I won't go into too much detail, but we can see here, look, we've got a horizontal support of about 1550 that needs to break on a 4 hour, and at probably around 1581. Now this is, I would say, would you describe this as a symmetrical triangle?
Yeah, actually that does. Yep, I think so. I think it's stuck in a range there. Yep.
So we're stuck in a range, and we could be stuck in this range for a while. So I guess based on this triangle here, which we've drawn, we should expect ETH to take a step back down now towards probably about 1555.55. But I'm not going to expect a breakout till probably, judging by this chart, and very roughly, I would say Tuesday of next week, 7th of March, is that? Yeah. We should get some breakout in a direction. And what date did you say we've got CPI?
Not CPI, NFP. I think NFP might break. Yeah, it's on Friday the 10th.
So we could potentially consolidate even longer into that. But yeah, look, ETH is, and most of crypto is following suit with BTC, and it will do. As long as BTC keeps in this range, altcoins are just going to shit themselves. So stay away from the altcoins and lower cap coins. And if you're trading, I would rather just stay to BTC and ETH at this point. Back over to you.
All right. So one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot is we had the monthly closures, but if you look at the monthly closure on the Dixie, what do we see? We see a nice, almost bullish engulfing. We see a double bottom, right? At that major support that we've been calling out for the past few weeks. And now the question is, will it follow through with the same momentum that it had before, right? And just looking at previous price action, it's quite possible that can happen, right? If you zoom out this area, usually we have that kind of momentum, right? If you look at that area, what do we see? Momentum, right? Momentum. So possibly we can see a lot of dollar momentum, right?
Momentum.
Yep.
Say it again.
So yep, that's what I'm looking at with the Dixie. Let's look at the indices. Let's look at S&P 500, SPX. We had really nice shorts last week, which played out. Let me just delete this one. This is the one which played out last week, and we have one which is still moving towards our entry points. So let's look at the monthly first. So the monthly time frame, what do we see? It's still stuck in that monthly consolidation range that we mentioned past few weeks, and nothing really significant here. We've been seeing this resistance hold for the past few months. Let's look at the weekly time frame. The previous week is interesting. We see some rejection below here. We see rejection, but you look at the candle here, there's no wick towards the top. That shows the buyers were in complete control till the market closed. Yeah, so that's interesting to see. And if you look at structure wise, right? Structure wise, there is a reason why I marked this orange line out here. If you notice the weekly closure, the weekly did not close below it though, right? So technically the structure still remains bullish here at the moment. So just by looking at this, let's look at the daily time frame first. So just by looking at this point that I've mentioned here still holds. Why? What did we see? We saw double tops. we see the neckline break. Now I expect a retest of this area for it to drop, right? So the same analysis still holds true. And if you look at the weekly time frame, I was still again perhaps mark this area off. That's a nice number, 69, and we'll keep that as such. So daily time frame, I think once price retests the area here, we can probably see a move down here, breaking these structure areas all the way down here, right? To be even I think so. I think this would be a very high probability short if it can establish a resistance around here. And then you could probably target the lows of the previous structure level, which would be around here. That's a nice big move, right? So that's what I'm looking with SPX. Nothing has changed. This point here is when the monthly consolidation area breaks, right? So this is why I've left this point on still. So these are the 2 points I'll be looking at this week. Let's look at Dow Jones, US 30. Dow Jones, we had a nice move last week, right? We had a short position here play out. We had a short position here play out, both ways. Let's look at the monthly time frame first. So the monthly time frame is interesting. What do we see? We see resistance, right? And what do we see with the previous month closure? We see a nice bearish engulfing, right? Breaking somewhat the consolidation area there. And let's look at the weekly time frame. So the weekly was stuck in a massive consolidation, this whole orange area that we have been pointing out. And what do we see happen this week? We see some form of break that did happen this week here, but still price is still moved inside that orange area, which I don't like. Even if there's clear price action inside, I wouldn't take any positions personally. Yeah. So higher probability would be for maybe I stretch out the box a little bit there. And I think personally, I would wait for this area to completely break off. So I think that would be at, let me mark this off. So right there, I need this structure point to break. And this would be where I would take a short position, a higher probability short position. And this would be at, where is it? 32,750. I think this is the quarter point maybe. Yeah, there we go. That's also a nice short position to take off, higher probability. That's the only thing I would be waiting for personally over here. In the event, I don't think it's going to happen, but in the event, if it breaks the high of this area here, if you go over here, over this orange box here, that's when maybe I might take long position. But personally, I do not know if that will happen just by looking at our fundamentals. But I'm going to mark it off anyway. So right there, yeah. That's what I'm looking with Dow Jones. Now let's look at British pound, US dollar. So it's been choppy though with British pound, US dollar. Let's look at the monthly first. The monthly isn't telling us much. We do have a medium probability bearish engulfing, and plus we see a rejection at the yearly trend line, right? So if you see what rejection 3 weeks, 3 months in a row at that area there, right? So there is bearish sentiment, and that structure is technically still remains bearish on monthly. On the weekly time frame, we still remain bearish. Why? Do you see how the structure level there broke through and how we've been holding that resistance there? So we remain bearish, but we saw a lot of wicking around this area, which you have to be a little bit careful of. And if you look at the current weekly closure, what do we see? Price is again maintaining resistance around this area at 1.21500, a quarter point, right? Let's look at the daily time frame. I think we have a structure point here, which I need to mark off. 1 second. So right there. So this structure point will be a higher probability area. If this area breaks through, maybe possibly you can see wait for a short position, and I think this falls at, I think 400. Yep, there we go. So I would wait for is two things. Maybe wait for the break immediately and then take a short position, or wait for the initial break to happen, let it make its move all the way down, and then go ahead and take a short position at the retest, right? So if you look towards the left, I think if it can mimic this move here, right? That's a nice big move towards the downside. And usually before it makes big moves, these pairs, they like to grab up all that liquidity, right? For price to move. So I think it might be done grabbing up all that liquidity. So keep an eye out on this point here. Let's look at the daily time frame. So the daily, if you notice though, it has been making lows, lower highs, lower lows, but in a very choppy way, right? So you see what? Lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, lower lows, lower lows, lower lows, right? So at this moment in time, I would wait for this structure point to break through the daily structure point and wait for this weekly structure point I have mentioned to break through. So we have two things here, which are perfectly aligning, the daily structure point and the weekly structure point, right? So this is the only short position I'll be looking at to take with GU. Let's look at the one for a second. Let's look at the 4-hour time frame. We do see head and shoulders play out last week, right? We see head and shoulders. So let's see what happens this week on the daily time frame. Let's look at the British pound, Japanese yen. We had monthly candle closures, and what does the monthly candle tell me? It is bullish. Why? Because the structure point there, it did not close below it. We had 1 month which did close and it started to look bearish. But this current month we had a massive closure above. But if you look at the wicks at the both side, that's a little bit indecisive, right? I don't like that candle. But it is technically bullish. Look at the weekly is an interesting time frame here. Why? Do you see this green area that I've drawn out? What do we see there? We see a price gap that's been perfectly filled out, right? Once the price gap got filled out, we see a massive buyer's exhaustion towards the top, and we see a big rejection. So just by looking at this candle here, we are bullish structure-wise, and I think this week we might have a pullback, right? Possibly a pullback towards this structure point here at 160,800. Let me look at the daily time frame first. So the daily time frame, if you notice this current week, what do we see? A lot of choppiness, right? And we see this massive rejection. Look towards the left. What do you see? Price gap got filled perfectly, right? So we have a lot of rejection. I personally, I think I'm gonna wait it out because even if it does pull back to this area, you could take a position possibly at 160. Let's call it 161. Right? That would be one area of interest. And possibly if that does happen, you do have a massive range here to target. So it would be all the way up to 333 pips, big move. Or if price doesn't pull back and we see that this structure point breakthrough, perhaps this would be an entry point at 164, 300. But again, be very careful with taking positions because the fundamentals, we have heavy fundamentals towards the end of the week with Japanese yen. So take the higher probability positions, right? So that's what I'm looking with Japanese yen, right? So yep, so that's what I'm looking at. Let's look at gold now. Gold, let's look at the monthly time frame first. What do we see with the monthly time frame? We see a massive, again, triple tops, rejection at the yearly trend line, and we have nice clear triple tops. Plus, if you do look at the structure, right, like though the price has been pulling up all the way towards here, it remains bearish. Why? Because if you look at the structure, structure still remains intact because this area did not break through and did not close above. Therefore, we still remain bearish on gold with the monthly time frame. So that's interesting. Let's look at the weekly. The weekly this week has been giving us pullbacks, right? So what do we see with the current weekly candle? We see a massive bullish engulfing, very high probability taking off the highs of the last week, right? So I do expect pullbacks this week. Let's perhaps see on the daily time frame. Actually, a whole possible pullback that it comes all the way through here. And don't quote me on this. This is a prediction, but I think price can pull back and then drop. And when this monthly closure does happen, we might have a massive wick towards the top, right? So let's look back on that. But on the daily time frame, I think there's a possibility if it does pull back, it'll pull back all the way here. And this was an area at 1915. So there, 1915. Possible pullback here, and maybe you can take a short position there. But it's going to be a little bit risky. You have to be a little bit careful with taking a short position with this area there. A higher probability short position would be for weekly structure point to break, and where that is let me close this. So if this area here breaks at 1810, you can take a short position there, because then you'll have a nice, because the issue here was from the previous week, price was completely falling through, but structure remained here, right? But after this weekly closure, what do we see? Structure has moved here. We have a nice structure point there. So if this structure point does break, we are confirmed bearish on the weekly time frame, because the last week we had an issue was we did not have a clear structure point, right? So this week we do have one at 1810, and that break would be a higher probability short position, right? So that's what I'm looking at. If you look at the daily time frame, we are seeing a pullback, a necessary pullback, in fact. And if you look at the daily candle that closed, that's a Marubozu candle, pretty much, which doesn't, which shows you heavy buyer momentum because we don't have the bottom wick and pretty much no top wick. So possibly we see a pullback all the way through here. But in the event if price does break through above here, then we are going to be bullish, right? But for the moment now, I remain bearish till this till price stays underneath these highs. So that's what I'm looking at with gold. Very simple analysis. Let's look at the 4-hour time frame for a second. So we do see how it did double bottom there, right? Double bottom, started taking off structure points all the way through, right? Creating higher highs, higher lows. And yes, I think it's a heavy possibility because if you notice, we have a massive price gap there, right? So maybe a retest here is heavy, very likely. So that's it with our analysis this week.